Welcome to this next installment, and today we're all going to be focused on non-calorie counting approaches, specifically intermittent fasting to begin with. We'll be discussing more in the upcoming modules, and also the sort of pros and cons to intermittent fasting, the different types of strategies you can use, and we'll go from there. So when it comes to intermittent fasting, we'll be taking a look at some daily fasting methods. We'll be taking a look at some weekly fasting methods. And again, like we said, just taking a look at the pros and cons so that you can consider as an individual if any of these strategies are going to be fantastically beneficial to you, or if it's something that it's probably not going to work for you. So to begin with, when it comes to daily fasting, there's a few different types of strategies, and there's no hard and fast rules to this, by the way. When it comes to the strategies for fasting, essentially each day includes two things, which is a fasting window and a feeding window. Now, as you can see in the second bullet point there, we've got a 16-8 approach, a 14-10 approach, and a 12-12 approach. And this just refers to the periods of time that you fast and feed. So 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of a feeding window, 14 hours fasting window, 10 hours feeding window, and so on. So one thing I would say is, for you perfectionists out there, one thing I'd say is, please don't worry if you're aiming for a 16-8 approach and it turns out to be 15 and a half hours. It doesn't have to be to that level. It's not for that purpose. It's much more to do with whereabouts are we aiming for and what sort of balance is going to work for us as an individual. So what happens is, when you're fasting, you have those windows set up, and then when you're having your feeding windows, we can, within reason, consume food as you wish. And a little asterisk there, within reason, because obviously, we can't just go to the opposite side of the spectrum and just load up on crisps and biscuits and takeaways and things. Of course not. Again, I'm using an extreme example to paint the picture there, but you get where I'm coming from. We still have to be mindful of the quality of our nutrition, and to a degree the quantity as well. So it's not sort of a secret fix or something like that. It's just a strategy that could work perfectly well for you, providing that we have this mindset of, within reason, consuming as you wish during those feeding windows. When it comes to weekly fasting, one of the most popular approaches for having your strategy over the course of the week instead of daily is the 5-2 approach. So like we discussed a moment ago, the daily fasting includes fasting windows every single day of the week. However, when it comes to weekly fasting, what we do is, on 5 of those days, again, within reason, we consume food as we wish. And then for 2 days out of that week, we have heavily restricted fasting days. So over the course of the week, those 2 restricted days, those are the days that are going to create that bigger calorie deficit for you, and again, enhance those weight loss results. So again, we can clearly see at the bottom there, again, not to repeat myself here, but within reason is really important. It doesn't just give us license to have 5 days of literally having whatever you want and having as much as you want and any quality you want. We still need to be mindful of having fantastic quality dietary intakes, avoiding those peaks in intakes, because even if there's a little bit of a peak over 5 days, that could soon add up to making that sort of 2 days a little bit pointless, really, because obviously if you're wanting to lose weight, those 2 fasted days are the days that you're creating that calorie deficit. So if we're peaking on the other 5 days, that could actually, in a way, cancel out those 2 days of fasting, and it could be a little bit of a roller coaster for you for little results. So we need to just be making sure that we're having a bit of common sense and thinking, is this going to fit for me? Is it going to be the right approach for me as an individual? So we've touched upon a couple of these, but when it comes to the pros and cons to intermittent fasting, just like with any dietary strategy, whether it's portion control or calorie tracking, intermittent fasting absolutely comes with pros and cons as well. So it can be simple to follow. There's no calorie counting, really easy to implement in and around your day-to-day life. You don't have to have any sort of massive skill levels or anything in huge knowledge resources or anything like that. Some people really don't want to be calorie counting, so this could be a really good suitable swap out for you. It's flexible to a degree because there's lots of different types that you can pick for yourself. That fasting window might be a little bit too big for me, so maybe I'm just going to go somewhere in the middle. And again, you can just have that little bit of flexibility. We know that it's effective. There's lots and lots of research that's been published in this area for lots of different reasons, but intermittent fasting has been seen to be very effective in numerous occasions. And you'll notice here at this stage that I've put adherence in both the pros and the cons section here. And again, this to an extent, this is the same for any dietary strategy, because if you're going to adhere to it as an individual, fantastic. When it comes to the cons, some people might not be able to adhere to this very well because there may be longer periods of hunger. In particular with a 5-2 approach, me personally, I could cope really well with only having a few hundred calories on those fasting days. It wouldn't affect me massively. Somebody else could do the exact same approach and it really, really affects them and has larger impacts. So for adherence purposes, that's one of the most important factors, because if you're not going to stick to it, it's not going to have long-term results for you. So that's one of the key things to consider, really. Of course, alongside things like those periods of hunger we mentioned, potential lower energy levels, especially on those fasting days. Again, it sounds quite intense, but potential contribution to eating disorders. Again, these sort of habits of on-off thinking and, I suppose prioritizing hunger and going down those sort of routes on a psychological perspective, that can potentially, if you're an individual that may be susceptible to that, this may be a strategy that you need to avoid, for example. So it's really important to consider. And then there's other things like decrements to lean mass as well. However, that's a potential con, but if you're hitting your protein intakes, there's going to be minimal, if any, impact there. However, if we're only consuming 2 meals per day and your protein recommendations are quite high, it might be quite difficult to hit those protein intakes within 2 meals per day because your fasting window is a lot smaller. So again, it's all about weighing up all of those pros and all of those cons and thinking, is this going to be a fantastic solution for me? And don't worry if it's not. So just a quick overview. We've got to consider all of these different strategies. We've got to consider your individual needs, your individual preferences, and also your day-to-day commitments. So, somebody, for example, that doesn't have children in comparison to somebody who does have children, that's something that needs to be factored in. And the same with picking any dietary strategy. However, if there's going to be periods of hunger and maybe on a day-to-day basis, you've got lots of other commitments and stresses in your day-to-day life. It could be nothing to do with family. It could be work, for example. It could be traveling. It could be all of these different things and more. Make sure you factor all of these things in to any dietary strategy that you wish to pursue. So intermittent fasting's got some fantastic benefits. It's also got some potential drawbacks too. So lay all those on the table and take a little bit of a step back and think, is this going to be something suitable for me as an individual?